No. That is, but when I come into the reception, you know, for the first time, Katie and so-and-so, start the slow clap. I'm going to have a sad spot. It's going to be great. So, how you guys doing tonight? Awesome. Guys, I have some really cool stuff to talk to you about. And because of that, because it's so important, I'm actually going to use some notes, and I hope you guys will forgive me for that. Emily, will you hold on to my Bible? Thank you. I know, this is really unprecedented, but precedented? With a C. Not president. So anyway, let me tell you a quick story first. So, my sophomore year of college, this gum is awful. My sophomore year of college, I had the opportunity to go to Italy. Has anyone been to Italy? I know, yeah, some people have. It's pretty cool. Oh, you live over there, don't you? Pretty awesome. Okay, so I had this opportunity to go to Italy, and it was awesome. Like, the day we flew out, I didn't sleep, and we flew right into Rome, and it was just like crazy. You're in Baltimore, and then you're in Rome. And then from there, we went through Tuscany, and we went to Florence, which sounds really cool. I did not like Florence. It rained a lot. And then we ended up in Venice. And let me tell you what, Venice was awesome. It was so cool. It's beautiful. Something really interesting about Venice is it's actually built on top of water, which is crazy. You guys probably knew that. But never heard of that. So anyway, there's a bunch of canals and harbors, and it's just beautiful. Marshland, whatever, water. Same thing. But anyway, something interesting about Venice is that every single night the tide comes in, and the streets just flood. It's crazy. So this one night, me and my friends went out for gelato. I got pistachio, pretty fantastic. And we stayed out kind of late, and we were coming back to our hotel. We rounded the corner to our hotel, and the path in front of us was completely flooded. Like, we had no way to get back to our hotel. We were like trying to like go around, and we're like backtracking, but like it was completely flooded, and there was no way of getting through this water. So we were like separated, right? We were cut off from our home, and there was nothing we could do about it. So 2 weeks ago, Jesse Munson talked. It was pretty awesome, right? And he talked about our need for Jesus, our need for a relationship with him. You know, we can try to look, you know, we were made for that, and we can try to look as good on the outside as we can, as put together, but without Jesus, we don't hold water. So tonight, we're going to talk about separation. Just like I was separated from my hotel, we're separated from our true home, from our life source. And we're separated because of this reality of life called sin. And I know you guys have probably heard of sin before, but tonight we're really going to unpack it. We're going to talk about what sin is, and what does it have to do with us, anyway. So Matt Craig gives this really cool illustration, and I love it. You guys have probably heard it before, but I don't know if you knew this, but sin is actually an archery term. When you go to shoot at a bullseye, if you miss it, it's called sin. So it essentially means missing the mark. But when we sin, it's not just us shooting for the bullseye and missing it. We're not even aiming. You know, we're going in every other direction. Sin for us is an action. You know, it is a decision that we make every single day. Here's where I'm going to use my notes. But it's also a condition. And I want to read a passage, Emily, from Mark about how sin is a condition. It's coming from Mark 5. There was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered under many physicians, and had spent all she had, but she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard reports about Jesus, and she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, "If I touch even his garments, I will be made well." And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned around in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" His disciples were like, "Do you see this crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. go and be healed of your disease. Thanks, Emily. So this woman was sick with a disease that made her untouchable, untreatable, poor, and deteriorating. When we're sick with this condition called sin, it burns us out, it deteriorates us, it makes us untouchable. We're helpless in it just like this woman. She went to several doctors, she spent all she had, but she only grew worse. And in the same way, we can spend all we have, we can do anything that we want, but nothing quite solves the problem. I'm going to, actually, Luke, do you mind helping me get this chair for me? I'm going to show you guys an illustration that I really like to kind of explain this problem. Thanks, man. Guys, give up for Luke Chase. He's awesome. So our condition called sin, our choice to sin, it creates a chasm between us and God. Let me draw this for you. So this doesn't look like a huge break, but it is. Just think about this as like being infinitely wide and infinitely deep. Or you guys can think of it like the Grand Canyon, if that helps. So this is like really, really big. And over here, we have us. And over here, we have God. So does everyone get that? Yeah? Okay. So, if this is like the Grand Canyon, no matter what we can do, we can't cross it. In Romans 3:10 through 12, it says, "No one is righteous, not even one. No one understands, no one seeks for God. All have turned aside. Together they have become worthless. No one does good, not even one." No one can even come close to approaching God. I can try. I can sit at the edge of the Grand Canyon and jump as far as I possibly can. But it's not going to work. I'm not going to be able to bridge that gap. We can bring in an Olympic long jumper here. He can probably jump 3 or 4 times as far as I can. But it's still going to end the same. We can't bridge that gap. And you guys might think, hey, I mean, I'm not as bad as the next person. You know, I'm pretty good. I haven't, like, done anything horrific, and I'm actually a pretty good kid. I don't cheat. I respect my parents, of all things. That's crazy. You know, that has to count for something, right? But just like me and the long jumper, it doesn't matter. We both end up in the same place. And that's our condition. There's this other verse from Romans that I want to share. It says, "All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God." So there's this chasm between us and God, and it's just like I was in Venice. You know, we're just separated. We're separated from our true home. We're separated from our true place. But what does this mean for us? You know, we're hanging out on this side of the cliff over here. I'm going to erase that because that's just depressing. Alright, so we're hanging out on this cliff. I'm an artist. So what is... Woo! We knew that was going to happen eventually, right? Okay. Nice. But in all seriousness, guys, what does that mean for us? When we're hanging out on the side of this cliff, so what? What does that mean? What it means is this. I want to share a final verse from Romans, and it's, "For the wages of sin is death." And this is a physical death, but also a spiritual death. And a physical death, we know, everyone physically dies. But did you guys know, listen, did you guys know that we weren't meant to? We weren't meant to die. But because sin entered this world, we were cut off from our life source. And we ultimately die and are cut off from God and life and anything good. We also have this spiritual death. You know, in life, we experience death. Have you guys ever felt empty or helpless or broken? That's what a spiritual death feels like. See, because of sin, the wages that we have to pay is death. It's a punishment, but I'll tell you guys, it is a punishment that God is not okay with, that God hates. So here are the facts about sin. 1, we're separated from God. There's this unbreachable chasm between us. 2, the payment for sin is death, both spiritual and physical. And 3, and this is kind of a tough one to swallow, but there's nothing that we can do about it. Just like that woman who had the bleeding, she spent everything, she went to several doctors, but she didn't grow better, she only grew worse. Guys, I know that this is heavy stuff and it's kind of hard to swallow, but I'll tell you what, this isn't the end of the story. Let me say that again, this isn't the end of the story. When we think about Jesus and that woman, what happened? That woman came to Jesus. That woman surrendered her condition, and she was healed. And the cool thing that I really like about that story is Jesus turns to her, and he says, daughter. He calls her daughter. Because Jesus loves us an insane amount, more than you can possibly imagine. And he looked at this picture, and he was totally not okay with it. He was like, I have to fix this. We need to do something about this. And he did something huge to make up for it. So we're going to talk all about that next week. And I'd encourage all of you guys to come back and hear what we have to say. But if you guys can't make it for some reason, or maybe you're like dying and you're like, okay, this picture, Katie, I'm a little freaked out by this, and I want to know now. I want to know tonight, what's the solution? What happened? How do we fix this problem? If that's you, come grab me, Matt, Kate, Jesse. We'll talk to you about it. We'll tell you all about it, because we know. We've experienced it, and it's awesome. Or just come back next week, and we'll tell you about it then. Sound good? All right, let's pray and head to Wendy's.